Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Koenig Knives Arius. The Arius is a knife that is designed by TJ Schwartz, who is the same guy who did the Millet Torrent, among some other things. He's got a recent collaboration with CRKT, and it's made by Koenig Knives, which is a small outfit out of Idaho, consisting of a guy, Bill Koenig, his sister, and then a couple of other people, I think, but small little business there. And this is a knife I became familiar with from Blade Show. I walked up to the Koenig Knives table, I handled this, it was just like, oh my God, this is good. And in fact, it was so good that I rated this among my top 4 knives of the entire show that I handled. And indeed, when I got home, I got in touch with Koenig and I picked one of these guys up for the channel to review. And so here it is. Let's do a size comparison real quick. This is a Spyderco Delica. So you can see this is not a small knife whatsoever, both in terms of the size of it as well as the width. This is not a thin knife either. I mean, it's chubby little bunny, but that's okay. So there it is with the Delica. Right here's your steel wheel cut jack, number, it doesn't have a number. It's a 3.5 inch, and then here's your Ontario Rat number 2 down here. And then, of course, the Spyderco PM2 is a nice size comparison because blade-wise, they're in a very similar sort of state. This guy is exactly 3.5 inches. Then finally, a couple of notes on this particular one. The blue screws are an option that you can order individually, but it usually comes with black screws. And so is this mirror stonewash blade, which I'll see if I can show it off. I've got a little bit of, this is some calligraphy on the wall behind there, so you can see that beautifully. And let's see here, and I'm trying to get the phone that I'm filming this on. Either way, you can see it is a beautiful mirror finish coupled with a very nice stonewash that you can kind of see in there. So this is just a beautiful blade finish, and that is an extra option that you pay a little bit more for. So not every Arius is going to have that. But let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of your Koenig Arius here. Okay, so on the good side, first off, this is made entirely in the States, in Idaho at Koenig Knives. I live in the States. I cheer for my home team, so it's nice to buy something here. But moving on, this is also ergonomically great. It's beautifully contoured in the hand. It's got these contoured scales, lots of little chamfers around, and look at the thought to them. Because see, this chamfer is at a different angle than this one, which is different from this one, which is different from this one. It's very clear that they've thought a lot about how to put this how to make it great in the hand. The clip is nice and big and wide, which means it's not a hot spot. It's just another area. And frankly, it just locks into the hand nicely with this contouring. This is just not going anywhere. So ergonomically speaking, this is a great knife. Next thing, it's easy to disassemble. You saw from the video, it's straightforward. Every part of this, there are no free spinning elements because the pivot is captive over here. Not captive, it's just won't spin. It's using T10, T15. I mean, it's great to disassemble. Absolutely spectacular. So that's good. Next thing, customer service has been great. I had an issue with one piece of hardware on this guy when I got it, and Koenig made it right very quickly, paid for shipping. You know, as good an experience as one can have there. And, you know, at some level, the measure of a company is how well they handle things when things go off the rails. Didn't go far off the rails, but still, they did it well. So that was great. I appreciate that very much. Next thing, the blade in this guy. This particular blade is in CTS 204P, which is one of the best steels, if not the best steel out there. It's chemically equivalent to M390 20CV. They also offer this in CTS XHP, which is also a fine steel. Honestly, to me at least, it feels like a step down in terms of wear and stain resistance, so I'm glad I was able to get 204P, but that's also a fine choice. But this steel is absolutely spectacular, and it also has some other nice elements in the blade here. It has a beautiful sharpening choil that works 100% fine. They've covered all the plunge with it. It's great. And even though the stock on this guy is relatively thick, I mean, if we compare it to the PM2, this is not a thin blade. It has a very, very hollow grind. Here, I'll see if I can show that off. Watch the world kind of distort in this hollow grind here. You can see there, and that's something that really means that this comes to a very acute cutting edge. Even though it starts thick, it gets really acute down there. And so this will still cut, which is great. It's relatively thin behind the edge and even thin at the tip. So I never had a problem with it as a functional cutting tool, which is very nice. Next thing, speaking of the blade, this mirror stonewash is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, seriously, if we set this down here, you can see this is the cord that comes in to charge the phone up here that's filming this right now. I mean, this is beautifully mirrored. You can see some calligraphy that I have hanging up behind the desk here. I mean, this is a great freaking knife in terms of, I love this mirrored finish. That said, it is, you can tell someone put a lot of work into it and you are going to pay a price for it. To get this mirror stonewash finish with the satin flats, you are paying $120, which is a lot of money for something that is entirely a luxury. It is entirely to make this knife prettier. I saw it at Blade Show, I fell in love, and so I wanted it. And I haven't seen something that is as nice a combination of the stonewash and the mirror on another knife, but it is really pretty pricey. But you can tell the effort went in. Okay, whatever. Thing is, it's completely bad segue there. Moving on, it has a very nice lanyard loop. The lanyard loop on this guy is really integral to the design. Sometimes you get a lanyard hole that's just kind of like, oh, we threw a lanyard hole in there. Whereas on this guy, it feels like it belongs. And in fact, if you remove the lanyard hole, it feels like it would be a little less compelling. That's the best thing I can ask for in a lanyard hole. Something that's there, but also designed. And it is designed well, because even if you don't use the lanyard, it kind of helps ergonomically speaking. And it's great for flipping and whatnot. So that's very nice. And in fact, there were a bunch of details all over this thing that they were thinking about. The contoured scales are very nice, complete with an area for the finger to land when you flip the knife. By the way, the scales are contoured in such a way that you can't really touch the bottom of the blade here. So there's not really a room for concern unless you have like really, really tiny, like infant fingers. That's fine. But this area for the finger to land here, when you flip the knife, your finger falls into this nice little area with this groove and it slows it down. It's a little detail, but it's something they were thinking about. Similarly, the bead blast on this scale, I'm going to see if I can show this off using a flashlight, but it almost has, in some lights, a bit of a rainbowy quality, prismatic thing going. I don't know if I'm going to capture this, probably not. But in direct sunlight, the finish on this guy is actually very, very nice. And it's a lot nicer than some of your more conventional bead blast finishes, like this guy here. This is your Ferrum Forge Falcon, Master Op Ferrum Forge, whatever. But you can see they're both blasted finishes, but this one's way prettier. So I'm a big fan of that. Other details, the blue accents really do help things. The clip is great, and it's well designed as a clip. It's relatively thin. It's got some height to it. That's good. The non-rotating pivot is nice. And then one little thing that always impresses me, look at this. On the back of the lanyard hole, they've got a little bit of jimping there, which may seem silly at first, but then you remember that as you flip the knife, you are putting pressure in this direction with the knife resting like this. And so that little bit of jimping grabs in there and makes it easier to flip the knife. It's a little tiny detail, but it's an important one. And so that's very, very good. And there are all kinds of other little details all over this knife. Oh, the engraving is very nice too. See, it's like lays it in or something. Beautiful thing. The action on this guy is great. The action is honestly as good as anything I've handled. It's to the point where I can't really judge. Like, okay, it's very clearly in the same territory as the Norsemen in terms of action, or the Rask. It is a great fall shutty sort of knife. It has an incredible detent. The action works fine, although I'm terrible at flicking. I am really bad at middle finger flick. There we go. I'm bad at that, but you can do it. People who are skilled at that can actually do that on a regular basis, and it has a very nice two-hand open as well. The action on this guy is just great. This is as good an action as one could ask for, and this is, after, maybe a month or so of use, I'm sure it would smooth out much more over time. So the action on this is great. And then finally, the price on this guy. This is an expensive knife. The base price for a Koenig Arius is $460. This one, upgraded with the blue screws polish blade, is at $592. But the thing is, this is a huge amount of money, 100%, but holding this up next to comparably priced pieces from like Rayot or Chris Reeve, this is really impressive. The build quality, the attention to detail, the perfection is higher than a lot of what you're paying $490 or $460 for from other companies, and this has a level of action and a level of technical execution that is easily on par with knives makers like the Grimsmo Brothers Knives, Shirogorov, Brad Southard, Peter Rosenti. This is in high echelons, but it's in a much lower echelon price. And so, all told, I actually think that this is a pretty good price, particularly without the fancy stonewash, Miura stonewash blade. At $460, this is a lot of excellence for a pretty low price, all things considered. And so, even though it is a huge amount of money, I think that this is actually a pretty good value in that crazy we buy expensive knives sorts of sense. So that's the good, is that the base price is actually pretty competitive. The action is great. It's to the level where it is just as good as anything else out there. It is very nicely detailed with lots of cool little things they're thinking about. The lanyard hole works well. The Miura stonewash is just gorgeous. The stock is, even though it's a little thick, it still cuts nicely. The blade is in a great steel. Good customer service, easy to disassemble, ergonomically great, and it's made in the USA. Oh, that's a lot of good. Let's talk about what's great. On the great side for me is that this has a sense of true perfection. And what I mean by that is that although there were things that this knife didn't set out to do, and there were design decisions I may disagree with, this knife is doing perfectly everything it wanted to do. The action on this guy is as good as one could want. The detent and the flipping action is basically perfect. The blade finish on this guy is flawless. I can look at this and it is just, it's perfect. The scales are perfectly done with no issue there of any substance. Even the ones I handled at Blade Show had that sense of, we are going to perfect this design here. And so this has a feeling of, this is a design that is already well thought out, but we went ahead and made it perfectly anyways. And that's not something that you see very often, and especially under $500 or so. This is just a very, very good knife, and it comes as close to perfection for the things it's setting out to do as, you know, some other pieces that I also am in love with. So this is a knife that shows a just incredible perfectionism, and I find that great. Let's talk about what's bad. So on the bad side, first off, this knife is, to my taste, too big and too heavy. It is a chubby bunny 100%. At 3.5 inches, it's not like a huge knife, but it is very thick and it is very heavy. I mean, we'll use our little scale here. 5.81 ounces. That is a lot of knife, and that's way heavier than a lot of the things I carry on a regular basis. It's a biggin for sure, and right there alone, that means that this knife is not for me in the long term. Speaking of this guy being chubby, and it is definitely chubby in the vertical dimension, but the blade stock on this guy is also a little bit thick. This is not the best tool for super thin sorts of slicing, and I do kind of wish that they had gone a little bit thinner on the blade stock. I think it could be even more compelling if it were even slicier. But the thing is, the hollow grind helps it out, so I don't think it's a problem so much as a matter of preference. This cuts well enough for pretty much anything, so I'm okay with it. But that is something you're going to want to keep in mind. If you're looking for an absolute slicing beast, this is going to be a little bit thick if you're doing, you know, tomatoes and whatnot. So there you go. Although if you're doing tomatoes with your pocket knife, it's a little weird, but hey, I'm not judging. Next thing, this is just wishful thinking, but this knife does not have any kind of a numbering, a dating, or a steel marking even. The only marking on this is the Koenig, which is very tastefully done and whatnot, but I would love, one of the things I like very much that the Grimsmos do is that they put in a number for each one of these guys, as well as the date of manufacturer, which goes underneath the, which goes inside the scales here. I would love to see Koenig do something similar with this, even like on the inside of the backspacer or something, just because it is a nice little thing and it helps you feel a little bit more connected to the community. It's like, oh, which one do you have? I've got 496. What do you have? I've got 498. Something like that. It's not a deal at all, but it is something they could take advantage of, their little one-off production sort of method, and add, and I think it could be nice. But that's absolutely not really a thing. Speaking of things that are just barely a thing, the clip on this guy is mildly interacting with the lock bar relief here. You can see that a good portion of the clip is over the body of the knife itself, but there is this little area, and so if you've got like a particularly thick thing at the top of your pocket, like a thick seam, on occasion this can feel like it snags a little bit. That might be a little better if the lock bar relief was internal rather than external. It's not a big deal. Frankly, it's not even as bad as like on the Spyderco Sleesh Bowie, where that is a little snaggy, but it is something that, you know, maybe could be worked on. Maybe this line here could be chamfered a bit, but again, not a huge problem. Next thing, there are two missing chamfers on this knife. This is the level of nitpicking I'm having to resort to fill the bad section. One is that the inside of the blade hole is not chamfered at all. It's just 90-degree angles there. And the other is that this little area right below the lanyard loop, this line right here, does not have a chamfer. Everywhere else on this knife does, but this one just doesn't. I brought these up to the Koenig folks, and both of these issues are going to be changed in future knives. He already sent me a picture of one with this area chamfered out, and then this is getting changed in the future, so that's not going to be an issue after this guy, apparently. Next thing, the flipper tab is also a little bit hooky. You can see here that it's got a little bit of a thing to it. I don't know why I gave that a sound effect, but I guess it sure does. It's like a tiger claw. I don't freaking know. It's not terribly sharp. It's not terrible, but it does dig into the finger in a slightly unpleasant way. And I brought this up as well, and they've been talking about fixing that anyways, and so they're going to go ahead and fix that. So again, that won't be a problem in your knife likely. Then finally, the balance on this guy is a little bit far back. This is the point of balance here. It's not terrible, but it feels a little bit back heavy. And that is just begging to me for a little bit of internal milling here, which would help to knock down that substantial weight a little bit as well. I talked to Koenig about that, and they've actually been prototyping that, so that should be coming up on future knives anyways. So in practice, well, that's the bad, but they're going to be fixing most of it. They're going to do some internal milling. This is going to get chamfered. This is going to get chamfered. They're going to adjust the flipper tab a little bit more, and then my other issues were relatively minor. The clip is minorly interacting here with this part. There's no numbering, dating, or steel marking. The stock is a little thick for some people's tastes, and it is absolutely a chubby bunny, being big and heavy. And so that's the bad. There is nothing really ugly here, I'm going to be honest. So let's just go into the final conclusion. Final conclusions, this is a shining freaking gem. This is an incredible piece, because not only is it functional, it cuts things. I mean, carrying this guy, I had a very good cutting tool, which is more than can be said for a lot of really high-end pieces that lose track of the fact that, knives should be thin behind the edge and cut things. It's also beautifully made, with a perfectionist's eye. I mean, it feels like every square millimeter of this knife has been thought through, with little tiny chamfers everywhere you look. With every part of this design has been honed and detailed. The materials, particularly on this one with the 204P, are just top of the line, and mechanically speaking, this knife is among the best. This is an incredible action on every front, and I love it. And so this is a knife that is damn near perfect in its implementation, and perhaps most telling is the nature of that damn near. I had a very small number of complaints. A lot of them were nitpicks, and I was kind of searching. I'll be real here. The only complaints that I really had that are going to actually be fixed, though, which is great. I mentioned these things offhand to him, and he's like, see, even the inside of the clip hole is chamfered, guys. But anyways, I mentioned it, and he's like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll fix that. And so the next one will be even better than this one, and that's great, because not only does it show responsiveness, but it shows that they have a sincere desire to not rest on their laurels and not take a knife that is already great, but they want to make it better still. They want to make it greater, and that's something that I just love so damn much. And then to top it all off, the price on this guy, although it is absolutely substantial, is lower than a lot of knives that are similarly well made. I mean, this can hold its own in the land of the customs easily. You can put this up against the Resenti, no freaking problem, or any of the other high-end custom stuff. It beats mid-techs out there. I mean, and even the highest of high-end production, this can hold its own with the Grimsmos any day of the week. Yet the price, especially now that the Grimsmos have raised their prices substantially, I mean, the price on this guy is like almost half of what a new Norseman is going for these days. And so this comes across as actually kind of a value given the quality that you're getting here. So even though this guy is a little bit thick, a little bit big, and a little bit heavy to stick around for me in my permanent collection, although I'll be honest, the temptation is there, that's more about me than this knife, and I have zero problem calling this knife an absolutely shining freaking gem, which absolutely deserved its spot at the top of my Blade Show picks. I mean, this really was one of the best knives there, and is really, really, really impressive. And so if you are looking for a perfectly made, high-end piece at a pretty competitive price, all told, I really do think that this little Koenig could serve as the king of your collection. Because king is Koenig in German, or Koenig is king, either way. Anyways, luckily, this knife is better made than that joke. Okay, I hope this has been interesting to you. If you get a chance to check one of these out, you really should. It is really great. And hope that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.